Hello, friends. I hope this finds you doing well. I pray that you're healthy. I hope and I pray that you have felt the love and embrace of God within your life. Today, my sermon title is I Spy. Originally, I was going to talk about facing our fears, and I am going to mention some of that, but it's also about discernment and how we might live with wisdom in the midst of a world that is so rapidly changing and opening up all around. Our lesson comes from Numbers 13. It's a story in which Moses and the Israelites have come up to the border of the promised land, but before they enter, they send in some spies to scope out the situation, to check out the lay of the land, and to make sure that it is everything that God promised it would be. I invite you to hear our lesson read today by one of our graduating seniors, McKayla Adamson.
Numbers chapter 13, verses 25 through 28. At the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land, and they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the Israelites in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back the word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, "We came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Yet the people who live in the land are strong, and the towns are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there."
Leading up to the lesson that you just heard, the spies were given clear instruction. Spy out the land and see if it was truly a place flowing with milk and honey. What I learned was that the phrase to spy out is better translated observe, which really does change the application of the passage. To spy out means that we know what we want. It means that we're trying to get an edge and be able to manipulate to our end. To observe means that we're open, teachable, in search of wisdom. And that is what the spies were to do. Go into the land to be open, teachable, and in search for wisdom. Certainly, this is a helpful challenge for us today. So much of the time, I don't know about you, but my tendency is to want to spy out and think that I have it all figured out. When the truth of the matter is, the Bible, even life, teaches us that it's far more helpful to be open, teachable, and willing to listen. In any case, the spies, they go into the land and observe. And after being there for 40 days, they come back and they give their report. And it has some good news and some bad news, which all of life is like that, isn't it? Filled with the good and the bad. The good news is, though, that the land is filled with milk and honey. It is everything that they dreamed it would be. It was a place of abundance. That's what it meant to say milk and honey. It was a place where bees could buzz, where animals could graze, life could flourish. That was the good news. The bad news was this. There were giants in the land, descendants of Anak. Their name literally meant tall. The book of Deuteronomy tells us that these people were so tall that some of them needed 16-foot beds in order to sleep. Holy cow. Immediately, the Israelite community, they do what people do when they are presented with unexpected information. They expect the worst. They decide that there's no way they can go in the promised land because of these giants. For all we know, though, they're gentle giants, but we never get to find out if they are, because the community decides to circle in the wilderness instead. They circle again, and again. They circle for 40 years. Scholars tell us that they could have made it to the promised land and been there in a year and a half, but they decide to circle in the wilderness for 40 years, 4 decades. A powerful reminder of what can happen when fear seizes the collective consciousness of a community, which should be always our concern when we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. I remember when 9/11 happened in my own life. I was in college and I was walking back to class, and you could just feel the fear in the air. I can remember going to my dorm room and sitting down on the couch and immediately watching the news and thinking to myself, our world is going to change. I even said to my friends, we are going to war. What I didn't realize at the time and never could have predicted was that it would continue even to this day. My concern these days in the midst of COVID is that this unprecedented situation we find ourselves in will infect us with fear like it did the Israelites long ago. And we would circle in the wilderness of our fear again and again and again and fail to enter into the land that God desires for us. To be fair, not everyone wanted to circle in the wilderness. There were some voices that wanted to proceed on. Moses and Aaron wanted to continue on into the promised land. Joshua, whose name meant God is our salvation, certainly there's a message for us there, wanted to continue into the promised land. And a man by the name of Caleb wanted to proceed into the promised land. In fact, I learned this about Caleb. He was not a part of the original community that left Egypt. Instead, he must have joined the Israelites as they were journeying through the wilderness. He was a convert to the Hebrew faith. He chose to believe in the God that created all things, said that they were good, a God that seeks to free slaves from their bondage. When Caleb hears that there are giants in the land, he says that the people should proceed. And why? Because God is with them. Now, in this moment, what we discover is a helpful way to think about faith. Caleb teaches us that faith is about trusting in God's abundance, even in the midst of a land filled with giants. Caleb teaches us that without dismissing the problems and the fears and the things that we all face, faith is about believing in something and really someone more substantial. I don't know about you these days, but I'm in need of someone more substantial. It's so easy to be consumed by the giants and fail to realize the abundance of God's presence always with us. A person once described it this way: to have a prayerful stance is to look out at the world, to look out at reality, and to realize that God is looking right back at us. When we do this, we realize that there's really nothing to fear as much as someone to love. Now, I know this is much easier said than done. But I do promise you this, folks, that if we remember the presence of God that goes with us, we will find the capacity to build on something more solid than our fears. We will find the capacity to build on the life which is good that God is always breathing into our midst. I will close with a story. A few nights ago, we were getting tires at Discount Tire over by our house, and as we were there at Discount Tire, I was in the car with the girls, and Leslie was going in and taking care of buying the tires. Well, as we sat there, my daughter Ella says to me, "Dad, can we go back to church?" That's been the hardest thing the girls have said throughout this time. "Dad, can we go back to church?" And every fabric in my being said, "Yeah, let's go back to church." I told Ella, though, when she asked that question, not yet. It was then that her little 3-year-old mind began to twirl around, and she said to me, "Dad, I know what we need to do. Tomorrow the germs go away, and we can go back to church." Here's what faith says. The germs are real. They will one day go away. At least we will one day be able to overcome them as a species. We will become and be the community that God has intended us to be. And why? Because God is with us. Like Caleb of old, when we stand at the border of the promised land, and the tendency is to see a land filled with giants, let us remember to put our trust in the abundance of God. Let us remember to choose to build our life upon the milk and the honey. Because in the end, it's the loving things, the good things, the beautiful things that are ultimately of God and will last. Amen and amen.